Okay, welcome everybody to this first session in room 101 or the B track. And the first speaker today we have introduced a couple of minutes ago, Frederik. You will talk about the dilemma of practical risk management, determining the right operation, approach and balancing precision and speed.
Yeah.
Do we need to introduce you further than what we have before?
I can just say brief.
Put some a few words on it.
Yeah, I can do that. You can see the description in the program, but basically I work as a consultant in a company called Devoteam. We work with digitalization in a very broad perspective. And risk management and cybersecurity is one of them, and that's my field of expertise. So I'm spending my life consulting large corporations, public and private, in the matters of cybersecurity and risk management. However, what I'm going to talk to you about today is not specifically for cyber risk or cybersecurity. It's more of a generic approach that we've found works well, and I would say I've been doing this for so long that I'll not pretend that I have all the answers. The best I think I can do is maybe to give you some seeds of inspiration, maybe. I'm aiming to give you about 3 points that you maybe can put in practice at home in your own corporation, and see what you can do with, basically. So first of all, I would say the reason why I put this presentation together is because we've done risk management for a very long time. It's becoming more and more complex, especially in the cybersecurity arena. It's quite difficult actually to know what we're talking about. So the big problem here is that some of the models that we are all familiar with and that you probably all know and use are challenged when we deal with lots of people, lots of threats, lots of risks, and not agreeing on exactly how to process that. So some of the things that we often hear from organizations is that this is difficult. I mean, risk management, as you all know, is about engaging a lot of people. It's not something that you'll do from the quiet of your corner office. It's something that involves a lot of people, and if you're good at it, maybe it involves everybody in the business. And I often hear that people say, "I don't get it. I know what you mean by risk management, but I do not understand your questions, and I'm not sure that I can answer your questions in a precise way." And what happens is that if you ask people a question and they're not able to give you a good answer, they'll answer anyway. That's the psychology working here. So you'll get an answer anyway. So you'll just get bad data. And when you begin to process bad data and you calculate on bad data, it gets worse. So it would actually be better not to do a single calculation on that. That would give you the best knowledge, which is a conundrum, which is odd, but we have to deal with that. So this is complicated. A lot of people say, well, this is very, very theoretical. I mean, you've given me 100 different options. I mean, you're not describing my world. And some will also say, it's fine that you have the time to do this as risk officer or risk manager, but I don't. I mean, I have to move on. I have to do something else. So we have something about complexity and theory and things we all know about that may be difficult to put into practice. When we try to describe things that are complex in our company, we often draw them and make a little cartoon about how it works. This is actually also a process diagram showing 5 phases, and I would assume that you would all recognize a lot of the words here. By the way, this presentation is something that you can use, and if you want a high resolution of this drawing or anything else, feel free to contact us and we'll send it to you. So we share this, whatever we do, we share open source as much as we can. But basically, this is something that most people would say, I get this. I mean, somebody needs to identify risks. So if nobody's watching, probably nothing is going to happen. So we need to identify risks in some way or form and figure out if this is important or if it's not important. What is it? So giving it our first assessment. And if we do believe that it's something that needs further attention, then you can have people sitting around a desk figuring out what is this, who should we involve, who would decide this. Some of it you'll just park for later on because it's not urgent, and some will be processed by people like you. And some of it will have so big consequences or be a significant decision, which means that you would probably need some management decision on this. And if you decide to do a risk treatment process, which can be fixing the problem, ensuring it, avoiding it, the options, then you'll at some point probably also want to make sure that this actually worked as intended. So that's the process, so no problem. But the thing is that it's different people, which is shown here by different colors. These colors are specific roles. So it's different people, and they're in a different environment, and they're in a different working situation, and we need to take care of that. I don't know if you've heard about thinking fast and thinking slow. Show of hands, how many are familiar with that concept? All right, great. If you're not, I have some recommended reading for you. You can also get it on a sound book if you don't want to read it. But there's a guy called Daniel Kahneman. He's a Nobel Prize winner in economics, and he's been very famous for writing this book that has to do about 2 different the psychology of how you think, and basically the point is right here. So the quick speech of that is that you can think fast or you can think slow, and we do both in different situations. And when it comes to and this is relevant for risk management. So here you have the effortless system. It's fast, it's responsive. You do that for doing risk management when you go through traffic in Copenhagen to get here. That's all system 1. There's no risk analysis in that. You just watch and react. It's very, very fast. It's based on reflexes, and skills and intuition, but it's also based on what you know, which is where it becomes a little bit tricky because it's quite imprecise. So you just you just shoot and make a fast decision. If you've tried this before, so if you're a very experienced driver, you'll probably make better decisions than if you're inexperienced. And you can move stuff from system 2 to system 1. That's called training. So when you have physicians, you have pilots, you have soldiers. They're constantly trying to move stuff from system 2 because that would be too slow over to system 1. But this is where you do the analysis. So one of the first points is be careful about what you ask people to do, because you may be asking them questions over here, but they'll be answering them over here. And this is very much guessing. There's not much analysis here. You're guessing, you're giving it your best guess, and maybe it's good, maybe it's terrible, but you don't know. If you're the ones asking the questions, you do not know on what basis people respond. So maybe you should ask different questions to different people based on the situation that they're in. Does that make sense? This is very inspiring book, by the way, so I highly recommend it if you want a good read. So when we do look into risk management, what does that mean? Well, the system 1, the fast one, is very good at identifying risks, for instance. So looking at something and saying, I think that's a problem. You know, like going through Copenhagen and watching someone on a bike with a cell phone in their hand. So just identifying that and saying that's probably something that we should look out for. I don't know what the risk is, but it's something. Putting things in categories is also something that you can do fast. Is this something that can wait, or is it something that's urgent? But not much more than that. And telling somebody that there is a problem is also something that you could do. So shouting help, or get in touch with someone, pressing a button if there's a problem. That's also something that would be relevant for System 1. And it's based on routine and experience, so it's very, very good if it's something that you do on a regular basis. And that could be being a experienced project manager. So you've done projects hundreds of times, so you see this every single time, and that would make you very responsive. It could also be someone sitting at a help desk, service desk, in an IT department. So they would be quick to recognize something that's out of the ordinary and let someone know, but they would probably not have the time or maybe the skill to analyze it. System 2 is good for specialists. So validating the risks. So if you get stuff as an input from people responding on a reflex, then System 2 would be great at spending a little bit of time saying, what do we actually know about this? Knowledge and facts, as much as we can do with that. Risk management is more than fact, as we all know. But you can analyze and you can process, and all of this takes some effort. And that's why it's great to have people doing risk management that has this as their profession, and who have, you could say, trained their System 1 in a different way, because then you would say, I've seen these risks before. I know how to process that. I know who to engage in our organization, and I know who could probably give me a good answer to my questions. So, could we do both, or should we do one or the other? We're trying to design some processes where we do both, but at different points in time and with different people engaged. I wouldn't say that we found the grail of that and found the complete answer, but we have seen stuff that works. I'm not showing you this to go through a risk management process, but basically just to point on 2 steps in this that would be significantly different. This is from a corporation that said, we've seen the drawing and you had 5 steps. Could we reduce that to 4 or 3 maybe? Because 5 sounds a bit much. And we also always take a challenge and say, well, let's try to simplify this further. So how small can we do this without it losing its pulse or losing its benefits and its output? And this is basically where we ended up. But the first thing here is that we built a system around, the first part of the process about system 1. So being very inaccurate, quite inaccurate, but fast. So this is where you identify risks. This is where you capture stuff. This is where you watch and you get some input. And you can do that reactive or proactive. So you can take the reactive approach where stuff pops up. You could have the guy at the service desk saying something is wrong with our systems. Somebody is experiencing a problem. I'll react to that. And they have to do that quite quickly. The other way, proactive, is going out to do a risk assessment. So you go out and try to figure out what's the state of the nation. Maybe you test systems for vulnerabilities and so on. So that's the 2 inputs. But basically, the only question here is, how urgent is this? Is this something that you just want to identify and you don't think it's a big problem? All of this is not based on knowledge. It's based on what you think it is. So you think that this is not a big problem. It probably doesn't have a significant effect. And it's not urgent. Or I'm not sure really about what this is, but I would like to have it looked at by a professional at the first available time. So it's not urgent as such, but I want a professional to look at that. Or is this something where I'm saying, this looks pretty bad, someone look at this right now? And that's the decision that they'll make. But this is very much system 1 thinking, right? And the other point here is that the people receiving that, they can do the thing you know about where you put things into diagrams and give it your levels and figure out in a more analytical way that's less guesswork and maybe you do some analysis and engage other people. And that's system 2. Does that make sense? And we're not telling anybody about this, right? We're just telling you. So the people there, we don't tire with stuff like that. We'll just say, we'll give you a simple question that you are able to answer in your position, and we'll give you a little bit more complicated question that you'll be able to answer in your position. Next up is, what kind of questions are you actually able to answer? And that has to do with being specific, because you all know that you can ask people about what the risk is, but everybody also has a different perspective about what you feel is a risk and what 5 is or what 4 is. So if you don't get a picture, you'll paint your own picture. So being very, very specific is also something that we've often seen is not done. You can also be over-specific, and then you'll just tire people, and they'll stop reading after question 4. Anyone ever seen something like this? consequence and likelihood is risk? Sure. So what's the likelihood of a cyber attack on your system? And people will say 3. And I would say, how do you know? And I don't know. But it's probably not 5 or 1. So 3 is a good number. And when you put in a new state-of-the-art artificial intelligence, machine learning, robot, firewall, what's the number then? Well, then it's probably less, so 2, right? But that's not very accurate. So the point here is that maybe we should ask people questions that they can actually answer, and it's probably not the same people answering these questions. So this is a way to take this model that's frequently used and without throwing it out, saying what's beneath this that we could probably answer as a more precise question that people are actually able to answer from more on a fact base. And that's stuff like this. I've just put some tags on this. So effect, resilience, reaction is something that has to do with consequence. Mitigation, facts, skills, something that has to do with the likelihood. The point here is that, again, it's not the same people that are able to answer these questions. So the consequence, answering the question, what's the consequence to your business, is often answered by people in the business. So you could have someone who would be responsible for a process he could be a director in a company. He would be able to answer this, but that's the worst case scenario. He would answer towards the worst case scenario, but that's not really the case, because you've done something else to mitigate, and if you start talking to a business director about inherent and residual risk, I think you'll lose him. So maybe you should just ask him that simple question and that's it. But other people would be able to say, how resilient are we? So how effective are we in responding quickly? And if we get hit by something, the effect that could trigger this consequence, how would we be able to recover? So if you're excellent at these two, that would bring the consequence down. And it would be easier for you to explain why the consequence gets lower if you have a good recovery plan. If you have a good business continuity plan, that parameter would change, and that would change the consequence. So it's easier to figure out what the story is. Same goes with the likelihood that you could probably go in and have a look at the facts. So if people do not know what the likelihood of a cyber attack is, there's statistics showing what the baseline is. And the question is if you're better or worse than average. But average is something that you can figure out, and you can probably do that because you can look it up. You can look up what the baseline is. And I would always start there and say, this is the average, but maybe because we have skills and technology in place, we can make that likelihood smaller. And I've seen people saying, well, the likelihood is whether or not this has happened to me before or someone like me before. That's the likelihood. But that's not how you do statistics. That's not how it works. Because if it worked like that, the likelihood of my house burning down is 0. Because it's never happened before. It's from 1930, it's never burned. So if we use that logic, then there's no chance of it ever burning.
It's actually the frequency is 0.
Yes.
Like something else.
Exactly, but it's often put into the same box, and that's a good point. So you have to be more specific about what you talk about. And if you take something like this, again, you can use the slide afterwards. But you can just put in the basic example of a fire, just to do something that's generic. And how these specifics would trigger into a model like this. If you feel that would be helpful, then you feel free to use it. And basically what we usually do is we use a rating scale on each of these that is very clearly defined, and then take averages between this. It's a very, very simple calculating process, and we usually do what we can not to have advanced calculations at all, because it often makes the results worse, which can be difficult for an engineer to take in. So that was a bit about thinking fast and slow, and it was a bit about designing a process so it actually engages people with the right questions at the right time. The last point is whether or not you can automate this. And you could say that, this is getting lots of attention because the basic way of doing this today is Excel spreadsheets and emails. And that's and you can do a lot on spreadsheets and emails. Oops, that means my presentation is coming to an end.
You stopped your time.
Yeah, I think we'll make it.
Sure, there's something in the other end of this slide.
Never mind. So is there a way we can automate this? And us coming from a technology consulting company, we are faced with lots of different options in doing that. But automating things or digitizing processes is a pretty good idea, usually, especially if you can make them work so they're engaging the right stakeholders and giving you some transparency. So I've just basically just put in one slide because I don't want to go too far down that road. But just giving you three points of experience in terms of business process automation. First of all, we see that there's a lot of specialized tools in risk management, for sure in cyber risk management, but also probably in all other aspects of risk management. So we find that there's specific tools that are designed to be as precise as possible, but not necessarily fast. Not necessarily engaging the whole corporation, but more engaging the people that are dealing with that specific task. So what we have found works well is using platforms that are designed to engage a lot of people, big organizations. And usually these tools are already present in the corporations. So I know many of you come from large corporations, and you have systems like that. So you have IT service management tools or business process management tools, and maybe it's the same tool because it's basically just tasks flying around in your corporation, changing hands.